Hey everybody, today we're going to be focusing on how to paint the power armor up to parade ready standard for the Imperial Fists. If you notice, I took the hand off because it was protruding in the way. So, without further ado, let's start off on the Imperial Fist. Okay, this stage may sound strange, but we're going to add a wash for a base coat, Cassandora Yellow. The reason why is because it's a nice bright yellow, but of course you can use Averland Sunset if you wish. Sorry if my voice is messed up. I'm a little sick. Shake up the paint. Okay. Now, since we're dealing with armor panels, such as flat ones, we're not going to use a shade brush. We're going to use a medium layer brush for added control. But if you can, of course, use smaller brushes of this size. I'm just using a medium layer brush by Citadel. So, let's get started. So, for this, we're going to take some Cassandora Yellow from the pot and put it on our palette like so. Going to need quite a bit. The reason why is because we're doing the whole power armor area. If using contrast paints, you could of course use Iandan Yellow if you wish, but if you have shades just like me, we're going to use Cassandora Yellow. Just a little more. Just make sure you get a nice puddle. Okay, on to the miniature. So for this, we're going to focus on separate panels, like right here. Here, we're going to focus on this. And of course, washes focus in recesses, so if you see any pooling, like right here on flat panels, just poke it and just move it somewhere else onto the miniature. And just only pick one panel at a time. The reason why is so it doesn't pool on any other areas. And this is the old formulation of Cassandora Yellow, so you may need another coat, but don't worry, if you do, that's fine. And if you get any on the joints, don't worry, we're going to paint that a different color in just a moment. A little more Cassandora Yellow. And don't worry, if you feel like you need more, just grab a little more. Like that. Okay, so we're going to continue just on the lower part first to make sure we have a nice even coat of wash. So then we're going to focus on the rest of the armor panel. And also on the shoulder pads as well. Oh, and I used a base coat of Wraithbone over white just to make sure it gets that nice bright tone for this. Also focus on the backpack once you get done with the actual armor panels. Okay, that's the power armor base coated. Sorry about that. Okay, so next we're going to focus on something else. If you notice, we got some wash on the skin, so we're going to paint the skin right now. So for this, it may seem a little strange. So basically, what we're going to do for the skin is basically we're going to choose a base coat of Wraithbone just for a contrast paint later on. So grab some Wraithbone, shake it up. Now, Wraithbone comes pretty thin, so we don't need any water. But for this, I'm going to use a small brush. You can use a medium or small layer brush from Citadel. But for this, I'm using a 50D miniature brush. So for right here, twirl your brush, make sure it's a nice point, and onto the miniature. So basically, if you notice, we got some Cassandora yellow on the flesh of the skin, so we're going to fix that up right now. Keep in mind not to make it pool in too many recesses, even though it's a base paint. Okay, perfect. Oh wait, make sure you get some out of the crease. Okay, there we go. That's the flesh base coat. Okay, while we're waiting for the flesh to dry, we're going to focus on the hair of the miniature. So for this, you could of course use any tone, but for this we're going to use a contrast paint. For the contrast paint, what we're going to use is we're going to use a base We're going to use a contrast paint for the hair. For this, we're going to be using Grunta Fur. Now, if you have any sediment like this one, don't worry, just shake it up a lot. Make sure to always shake your contrast paints, or else it will dry really shiny. Okay, that's done. So for this, we're going to use basically a little flat brush. You don't need a medium layer brush because that size is too big. For this, we're going to use a flat brush. This is a flatter brush, and this is a size 0 flat brush. So right here, we're going to take some Grunta Fur from the pot, and put it on the palette like so. You don't need much of this paint. So onto the Imperial Fist. All we're going to do is focus on the hair. So just on the hair. Okay, that's the hair done. Okay, so on to the rest of the miniature. So for this, we are going to need Grunta Fur, but this is going to be a little bit tricky. So basically, we're going to take our fine detail brush. Where did I put it? You'll need a small layer brush if you can Citadel, but I'm going to use my 5-0. So for this, we're going to leave our Grunta Fur from the pot. And then we're going to take a technical paint called Contrast Medium. Basically, it's a contrast paint with no pigment. So, shake it up. Keep in mind, I have very little left, but if you need to, just get another pot of this. Maybe a little thick, but that's fine. Contrast Medium. If it's a little thick like this, don't worry, you can just buy another palette, but just make sure to save your contrast medium, like that. Okay, so, with our contrast medium, that's done. So now, we're going to take a small brush full with Grunta Fur, and just add it to contrast medium. May seem weird, but this is how we're going to overall recess shade our Imperial Fist. So just make sure, a little more contrast medium. Perfect. All right, wash it off in the brush first, and then close our Grunta Fur. We won't be needing that anymore for right now. So, as I said, we're going to be recess shading with a fine detail brush. But of course, like I said, I'm going to use this brush. So, for this, we're going to look at all the recesses on the power armor. Make sure you don't have too much paint. So, all we're going to do is we're going to focus in the very, very deepest recesses, like right here. So again, just make sure wherever you see a deep recess, kind of like in the cracks, like in between the power armor, just shade it with the Gorgon Different Contrast Medium Mix. Don't worry, if you get out of the recess, don't worry, we're going to be applying an overall highlight to the armor. Recess right there. And if you want, you could go on the shoulder pads as well, but we're not going to do that. If you want, there's just a deeper recess somewhere, but it's only on that shoulder pad, and that's pretty much it. So, basically, we're going to focus on the deeper recesses again, right here. And also, if you may notice, a Space Marine does have a lot of deep recesses, but just be patient, and then just begin. And this is just on the power armor, but if you want to see more details on painting, you can just look up the Imperial Fist painting video. But of course, you can look at the alternate chapter video by GW or Warhammer TV. Okay, that's the power armor shaded. Okay, so now, since the wraith bone on the face is dried up, we're going to let that recess shade dry, and we're going to focus on the skin tone now. So for this, you're going to need a medium layer brush, so for Citadel, but of course you can use a small enough brush that you find fit for the job. Usually you can use Gilliman flesh, but if a contrast paint is too thick, you can't really use it, unfortunately. So we're going to use a different contrast paint known as Dark Oath flesh, because it has more of a humany flesh tone. You could of course use Fire Slayer flesh, but again that's mostly used for dwarves instead of a human skin tone, but of course you can use whatever you like. Okay, so we're not going to be thinning it down, we're going to apply it straight from the pot, but just be careful. So for this, we're going to focus only on the face. So right here. Alright, that's the skin done. Alright, now, since that recess shade is now dry, we're going to highlight the power armor now. So for this, all we're going to do is we're going to base coat the armor. So, and the reason why we base coated earlier, but we're just going to use a layer paint for highlights. So, for this, we're going to use a layer paint. For this, we're going to use Uriel Yellow. Okay, so take some Uriel yellow, open it up, and and put it on the palette. Uriel yellow is a little thicker of an opaque contrast paint because it's one of the warmer shades, kind of like orange. So for this, we're going to use a flat brush for this. You could of course change brushes for certain areas. So take some Uriel yellow. If you may notice, it's a lot thicker for a layer paint, so we are going to thin it down. A little more. Okay, grab some water. Not too much because it's a layer paint. Okay, that's that thinned. So for this, we're going to focus on the flatter areas of the power armor. So basically the raised areas. So for this, we're going to focus on certain panels like this. Okay, so we're going to switch to a smaller brush for the flatter areas, for the areas on the legs, the backpack, and other things. So for this, we're going to use a small brush. For this, I'm going to use a size 10-0. So the reason why, because the little brush is a little bit bigger, and we don't need that much smaller for these areas. So for right here, we're going to focus on the power armor areas, like right here. For the knee pads, so we're going to we're going to coat the whole thing with Uriel yellow. A little more water for the Uriel yellow if it keeps going up a little strokey. So you want to avoid this panel line right here when you're applying the Uriel yellow. A little more yellow for the shoulder pads. Okay, that's the power armor highlighted. So now we're going to focus on a much smaller detail, which is the joints in between the power armor. For this, we're going to use a base paint. For this, we're going to use Mechanica Standard Gray. If you prefer using black, but if you don't have black like me, I'm going to show you how you make it look like an off black. So for this, take some Mechanica Standard Gray out of the pot and put it on the palette. Thin it down a smidge with a little bit of water. Okay, so on the Imperial Fist. So basically, we're going to focus on the joints in between the power armor, like right here between the torso and the legs. And if you don't know what the joints are, it's basically where they show the undersuit of an Adeptus Astartes. Make sure if you miss some parts, just make sure to touch it up a little bit. Okay, so that's it. Oh, before I forget, you could of course base coat for silver, but for this I'm going to use Mechanica Standard Gray for the vents right here on the pack. Okay, that's all the gray base coated. So now we're going to focus on the more prominent features on the Imperial Fist. So for this, all we're going to do is we're going to base coat the trim and the Aquila, also known as the chest eagle, on the Imperial Fist. So for this, we're going to use corn red. Take some corn red from the palette and put on the pot and put on the palette. So you have to be extremely careful because this is a red paint, and if it goes over yellow, it's going to be you can of course fix it, but it's going to take a while. So be very, very careful. So for this, we're going to focus on the Aquila, which is the chest eagle, and the shoulder pad trim. But first, I'm going to start with the Aquila. Oh, and I'm using a size of 10-0 brush. So always use, but of course, use your small layer brush if you're using Citadel, because these are very fine details. All right. All right, that's the Aquila done. And now we're going to focus on the shoulder pad trim. So for right here, be extremely careful. Be as steady as you can. And if you notice, I got some red on the yellow, but don't worry, you can just fix that in a moment. No more corn red because it's a little too thin. So for this, we're going to let our corn red dry. And just make sure you fix any other details. So you may notice where we've been a lot messy. However, we're going to fix that. Wait for that to dry just for a second. Okay, so basically, all we're going to do is we're going to take a base paint to fix the yellow. We're going to use Averland Sunset. Now this may be a different color. However, this is a base paint. It'll be really effective to go over the yellow, those red areas that we missed. So for right here, we're going to fix the trim. So for right here, go right along the trim of the shoulder pad and go and just drag your brush down. Alright, that's it for the shoulder pads. So you may notice the shoulder pads are slightly a different color from the yellow, but don't worry, you can just leave it on. Nobody really notice. But we got some yellow on the shoulder pad trim, so that's where we're going to fix it up with some more corn red. Just a little bit. Okay, so we're going to focus on where we hit the yellow on the shoulder pad trim. You don't need much, just a little bit, like right here. Okay, there we go. We just fixed our shoulder pad trim. So now it's kind of time to return back to the joints in between the power armor. So for this, we're going to take a contrast paint. Basilicanum Gray. So, shake up your paint pot. Okay, so after you shake up your paint, we're going to grab a medium layer brush. Actually, we can just use this flat brush. It's more at an angle. This is a size 0, but of course you can use a small layer brush or a medium layer brush if you wish. Color gray, put it on the pot. Okay, so basically we're going to base coat the gray. So we're right here, we're going to base coat all the areas where you see gray. Try not to get any on the power armor, but don't worry, you can just fix that if you make a mistake. All right, with the gray areas done, that's our Imperial Fist up to Battle Ready Standard. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully this will help you paint your Imperial Fist. But of course, you can look up other channels such as Warhammer TV Painting. For Space Marine painting videos, just look up Imperial Fist and you'll see it. So, goodbye.